If you woke up this morning and checked the silver market, you did not see a price quote. You saw a crime scene. And Bloomberg is not going to tell you this. CNBC is not going to tell you this. The Federal Reserve is certainly not going to tell you this. But I will. What I am about to show you are the documents, the numbers, the smoking gun that proves the biggest banks on Wall Street have built a house of cards in the silver market that is collapsing right now, in January 2026. Before I continue, I need you to do something right now. Not later, not when this video ends. Right now. Hit the like button. Not because I am asking politely, but because the algorithm is actively suppressing this video as I speak. YouTube does not want this information on anyone's homepage. The only way to force this information into the public feed is if you boost the signal. The like button is not a compliment. It is a weapon against censorship. Hit it now. To understand what is happening right now, we need to go back to 1971. That was the year Richard Nixon stood in front of television cameras and told the American people that the dollar would no longer be backed by gold. That was the moment the United States broke its promise to the world. For decades under the Bretton Woods system, every country knew that $35 could be exchanged for 1 ounce of gold. It was a guarantee, a foundation, and Nixon destroyed it with a single announcement. He called it temporary. It has been 55 years. That decision changed everything. Once money was no longer tied to anything real, the banks realized they could create infinite promises. Infinite paper, infinite leverage. And nowhere has this fraud been more systematic, more deliberate, more catastrophic than in the silver market. Silver has been money for 5,000 years. The word for money in many languages is literally the word for silver. In French, argent. In Spanish, plata. Throughout human history, silver was what people used to store wealth, to protect themselves from the corruption of governments. And then the banks decided to change that. They needed silver to be cheap. They needed it to be forgotten, so they built a system to suppress the price. And it worked for decades. In 2008, when the financial system collapsed and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, something extraordinary happened in the silver market. JP Morgan and HSBC controlled more than 85% of the commercial net short position in COMEX silver futures. 85%. 2 banks controlling the short side of an entire global commodity market. By the first quarter of 2009, those 2 institutions alone held 96% of all precious metals derivatives held by American banks excluding gold. $7.9 billion in paper bets against real metal. This was not trading. This was systematic price suppression on a scale never seen before. And what happened to them? Nothing. For years. The manipulation continued. Silver investors were mocked as conspiracy theorists, gold bugs, paranoid fools who did not understand how modern markets work. And then in 2020, the CFTC finally caught up with JP Morgan. They ordered the bank to pay $920.2 million, the largest restitution ever imposed by the CFTC in its history. And what was the crime? Spoofing, manipulation, fraud. JP Morgan traders had been placing fake orders to move the market, then canceling them before execution. They did this thousands of times over many years, maybe decades. The tinfoil hat people were right all along, but here's the part that should make your blood boil. After paying nearly $1 billion in fines, JP Morgan kept operating. No one went to prison. The fine was just a cost of doing business. A parking ticket for running the biggest manipulation scheme in commodity market history. Now fast forward to today, January 2026, and the game is finally breaking. Let me show you the numbers. The world produces approximately 820 to 835 million ounces of silver per year. That is total global mining production from every mine on the planet. But global demand in 2025 was 1.24 billion ounces. Let me do that math with you right now. 1.24 billion ounces of demand, 820 million ounces of production. What is the difference? 420 million ounces. But wait, what about recycling? Fair point. Total supply including recycling reaches about 1.01 billion ounces. So the real deficit is still over 230 million ounces. every single year for 5 consecutive years. From 2021 to 2025, the world consumed 820 million more ounces of silver than it produced. That is an entire year of global mining production that simply vanished from inventories. Gone. Consumed. And it is not coming back. This is physical metal being destroyed in industrial processes. Forever. Where did it go? Solar panels, electric vehicles, smartphones, medical devices, industrial applications that destroy the silver forever. You cannot recycle silver that has been turned into paste inside a solar cell. The metal is gone, and the banks kept selling paper promises like nothing was happening. Here is where the fraud becomes mathematical fact. The ratio of paper silver to physical silver in the market today is 356 to 1. For every single ounce of real physical silver that actually exists in vaults, there are 356 ounces of paper promises circulating in the market. Some analysts put the number even higher, at 408 to 1. This is not leverage. This is fraud. Pure and simple. How does this work? The banks sell futures contracts on COMEX. Each contract represents 5,000 ounces of silver. But here's the trick. They do not need to have the silver to sell the contract. They are selling metal they do not own. Metal that does not exist. They are betting that the price will go down so they can buy back their position cheaper later. This is called naked shorting. And when you can sell unlimited amounts of paper silver into the market, you can push the price down whenever you want. The execution happens at speeds no human can match. At 3:47 a.m. New York time, a block of 14,000 contracts gets executed in 0.00003 seconds. That is 30 microseconds. Faster than a blink. That is not a human placing an order. That is an algorithm designed to dump paper silver into the market at moments of low liquidity, when the impact will be maximum. The price crashes instantly. Investors using margin get liquidated automatically. The banks buy back their short positions at the lower price. They pocket the difference. And they repeat this process over and over, decade after decade. This worked for decades, but something has changed. On December 1st through 4th, 2025, investors pulled 47.6 million ounces of physical silver out of COMEX warehouses. That is approximately 60% of the registered inventory. In 4 days, 60% gone. Why is this happening now? Because investors finally realized the emperor has no clothes. They stopped trusting paper, they started demanding physical delivery, and when everyone demands delivery at the same time, the Ponzi scheme is revealed. Because the metal simply does not exist in the quantities they sold. Let me show you how broken this system really is. On January 1st, 2026, the COMEX futures showed silver trading at $72 per ounce. That is the official price. The benchmark. But if you tried to buy physical silver from a bullion dealer in Japan or the UAE on that same day, you would pay $130 per ounce. If you could find any at all. An 80% premium. This has never happened before in modern market history. Ever. Let me do that math for you. $72 paper price. $130 physical price. The difference is $58 per ounce. That is an 80.5% premium to get your hands on real metal. This premium is screaming at you that the paper market is a fiction. Shanghai silver benchmark closed at 19,200 yuan per kilogram. That is equivalent to almost $85 per ounce. The Asian markets are pricing in reality while COMEX still pretends everything is fine. The market has entered what traders call backwardation. In a normal market, futures contracts for delivery months from now trade at higher prices than contracts for immediate delivery. Storage costs money. Insurance costs money. But in the silver market today, the opposite is happening. Contracts for immediate delivery trade at prices several dollars higher than contracts for later delivery. The backwardation is the deepest since 1980, and what happened in 1980? Silver went to $50 per ounce. But this time, the fundamentals are far worse. Why is backwardation so significant? Because it means buyers are desperate to get their hands on physical metal right now. They do not trust that they will be able to get it later. They do not trust the paper promises. They want the real thing, and they want it immediately. Look at what is happening with contract positioning. On January 7th, 2026, open interest in the January contract rose by 1,431 contracts. That is over 7 million ounces demanded for near-term delivery. February rose by 1,564 contracts. Meanwhile, March fell by 2,936 contracts. The smart money is not waiting. They want delivery now. And the London lease rates for silver hit 39%. 39% annual interest to borrow silver for a short period. That is a number you see when there is a genuine shortage. When institutions are scrambling to find physical metal to deliver on their obligations. When the system is breaking down. Now let me tell you about the Federal Reserve's response. Because this is where the story gets truly disturbing. On December 26, 2025, at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, the Fed injected $17 billion into the banking system through the repo window. 2 days later, on Sunday, December 28th, at 5 p.m., the New York Fed injected another $34 billion. On a Sunday, banks do not normally need emergency liquidity injections on a Sunday evening. $51 billion in a single weekend into banks during a silver squeeze. The Fed does not publicly disclose which banks access these facilities. We do not know for certain who needed that money. But we do know the timing. This injection happened the same weekend that silver was hitting $84 per ounce. The same weekend that rumors circulated about a major bank facing margin calls on its silver short position. Is that a coincidence? I do not believe in coincidences. Not when the numbers are this big. Not when the timing is this precise. At 2:47 a.m. on December 28th, according to multiple reports, a bank was liquidated after failing to meet a margin call on its silver short position. I cannot independently verify this, but $51 billion in emergency injections over one weekend is not normal. That is not routine end-of-year liquidity management. That is panic. And immediately after the Sunday injection, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange announced it was tightening margin requirements for silver and gold futures, officially to contain speculative froth. Unofficially, to protect the banks with massive short positions from getting squeezed even harder. This is how the system protects itself. When you or I face a margin call, we get liquidated. But when a bank that is too big to fail faces a margin call, the Federal Reserve prints $50 billion and the CME changes the rules. Different rules for different players. Let me tell you about JP Morgan's position, because this is perhaps the most telling indicator of what is really happening behind the scenes. For years, JP Morgan was the biggest short seller in the silver market. They suppressed the price, they profited from the manipulation, they paid their $920 million fine, and kept going. They were the enemy of every silver investor on the planet. But something fundamental changed in 2025. According to multiple reports, JP Morgan has completely reversed its position. They went from being massively short to being long 750 million ounces of silver. 750 million ounces. That is almost an entire year of global mining production. Valued at over $40 billion at current prices. The first delivery report of 2026 shows JP Morgan aggressively standing for physical delivery. Maximum amounts. They are not settling in cash. They want the metal. The same bank that spent years pushing prices down is now accumulating physical silver as fast as they can. What do they know that you do not? Why did they flip their positions so dramatically? Why are they suddenly desperate to own physical metal after spending decades telling everyone that paper is just as good? Think about that question. Let it sink in. And then there is China. This is the part of the story that the mainstream media has completely ignored. On January 1st, 2026, China implemented new export restrictions on refined silver. Only 44 companies received authorization to export silver for the next 2 years. Only large, state-approved enterprises can ship silver out of the country. China controls 60 to 70% of the world's refined silver supply. They just turned off the tap. Let me do another calculation. China was exporting approximately 121 million ounces of silver annually. That supply is now restricted. The world already had a deficit of 230 million ounces. Add another 100 million ounces of supply disruption, and the deficit explodes to over 300 million ounces. The remaining COMEX registered inventory is about 127 million ounces. The annual deficit is now over 300 million ounces. The entire COMEX inventory would be drained in less than 5 months. The math does not work. There is not enough silver to meet demand. Period. So where does this leave you? Your 401k is probably full of paper assets. Your retirement account might have some exposure to precious metals through ETFs like SLV. You might own shares in the biggest silver ETF in the world, and you probably think you own silver. You do not. You own paper. Promises. Claims on metal that may or may not exist. The ratio of paper to physical is 356 to 1. When everyone tries to redeem at the same time, there will not be enough metal. The ETF prospectus allows them to settle in cash instead of delivering metal. When the system breaks, you will get dollars. Depreciating, inflating dollars, not metal. Let me make this personal. Say you have $10,000 in a silver ETF right now. At the paper price of $72, that represents about 138 ounces, but the physical price is $130. That same $10,000 only buys 77 ounces of real metal. You are already down 40% in real terms just by being in paper instead of physical. Here is the timeline of what happens next. In the next 7 days, premiums for physical silver will continue to expand. Contracts approaching delivery will see increased standing for physical. Inventories at COMEX will continue draining. The mainstream media will continue ignoring this story. Smart money will continue accumulating quietly. In the next 30 days, we will likely see the first public failure of delivery at COMEX. The exchange will force cash settlements because they cannot produce the metal. Premiums will hit 100% or more. The media will finally start reporting anomalies. Dealers will have lines out the door. Some will suspend sales entirely because they have no inventory. In the next 90 days, the paper and physical markets will completely decouple. COMEX will lose all credibility as a price discovery mechanism. Physical silver will trade at $150 to $200 per ounce or higher. Shanghai and Dubai will become the new reference markets. Banks with remaining short positions will face catastrophic margin calls. The Federal Reserve will be forced to intervene openly. Trading in silver futures may be temporarily suspended. Beyond 90 days, a new pricing system will emerge based on physical metal, not paper promises. Banks that survive will never again make naked short bets on commodities. Investors who held physical metal will see their wealth multiply 5 to 10 times. Silver will reclaim its monetary role after 50 years of suppression. Where was the regulator while this was happening? Who approved the 356 to 1 leverage? Who allowed banks to sell silver they did not own? Who looked at 5 consecutive years of deficits and did nothing? Who protected the shorts with margin increases instead of protecting investors? And most importantly, why did you not know about any of this until right now? They lied. They manipulated. They suppressed. They profited. They got caught. They paid fines that amounted to parking tickets. And they kept doing it. Again and again. Year after year. Decade after decade. Because the system protects its own. Because the rules only apply to people like you and me. Because when you are too big to fail, you are also too big to be honest. Let me tell you the mistakes you need to avoid. First, do not wait. Every day you delay is a day the insiders are accumulating. JP Morgan is not waiting. China is not waiting. Only you are waiting. Waiting for what? For the price to go down? It will not. For the mainstream media to confirm this? They will not. Stop waiting. Second mistake. Do not trust the paper price. The $72 price you see on your screen is a fantasy. The real price is what dealers charge for physical metal. That is the only price that matters. Third mistake. Do not assume the system will give you a fair exit. When the collapse accelerates, ETFs will suspend redemptions. Futures will settle in cash. You will be holding worthless paper while the insiders hold metal. So here's what you need to do. First, if you do not own physical silver, buy it now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Except that you will pay a premium. The premium will look cheap in retrospect. Second, if you own silver ETFs, sell them. Convert that paper into physical metal, pay the 80% premium, it will be 200% in 90 days. Third, buy from reputable dealers, not from banks. The banks do not have your interests at heart. Fourth, store outside the banking system. A safe deposit box inside a bank is not safe when the bank has a claim on everything inside it during a crisis. Fifth, subscribe to this channel with notifications on. When the next bomb drops, you need to know before the crowd does. The train has already left the station. JP Morgan is on board with 750 million ounces. China has locked the doors behind them. The COMEX vaults are draining by the day. The paper price is a lie that fewer people believe every hour. The only question is whether you are on the train or standing on the platform watching it disappear into the horizon. For 55 years, since Nixon closed the gold window, the system has told you that silver was just a commodity. For 55 years, they manipulated the price to keep you away from real money. For 55 years, they built a house of cards 356 stories high. That house is collapsing. Right now. In January 2026. And when the dust settles, only two types of people will remain. Those who held real metal in their hands, and those who held empty promises that evaporated in the collapse. Choose wisely. The clock is ticking, and it is not waiting for anyone.